Hello everyone! Welcome to another insanely long video where I rank stuff. Because I'm in a fighting game mood, and have been for a little while now, I decided to rank every single Street Fighter game from worst to best. There are a lot of things to say. First of all, ground rules. First off, they should go without saying, but I'm gonna be only counting Street Fighter games. Not games where the characters just so happen to appear in. So no crossover games. So the Capcom vs. Marvel series is not going to count. Second, no spin-off games. This should also go without saying, but I feel like I need to stress this to myself as well, mainly because last time I included Sonic Boom in my all Sonic Games Ranked video, which I'm pretty sure everyone was okay with, but I'm pretty sure that counts as a spin-off. So, and thirdly, and this is a big one, each game will only count once. Now, granted, there is one exception to it. That's Street Fighter 3. But there's a really big reason for that. Street Fighter 3 has lots of versions of it, only 3 versions, but all 3 of those versions are so different from each other that I consider them different games. But that's the only one that can break the rule. Every other game is going to count as just one game. Otherwise, this list would be filled with Street Fighter 2 games. Like, seriously, that's how many versions of Street Fighter 2 there are. It would just be filled with this. So, I cannot stress this enough. Street Fighter 3 is the only one where its separate versions will count. Anyway, here are the criteria. Is the game fun? Obviously. That's number 1. Does the game control well? Are the characters any interesting? And biggest of all, how is the gameplay? Because you can have everything else, but if the gameplay is terrible, then it's not going to rank very high. Anyway, let's get her ranked, starting with number 11. The original Street Fighter from 1987. Where do I even start with this? Street Fighter... this game is so bad. Okay, let me get one thing straight. The artwork for this game is decent. It's okay. It looks good, but it could definitely improve. But that's it. Everything else is terrible about this game. Starting with number 1, the controls. The way to win this game is to throw out Hadoukens and Shoryukens as quickly as possible, but good luck doing that, because half the time it won't read your inputs correctly. It is just so strange and awkward to control this game. Number 2, the characters. And by that I should say character, because you can only play as Ryu. You can technically play as Ken in the 2-player version of the game, but he's just an exact copy of Ryu, so you don't even get variety in this game. The worst part about this game are the characters that you fight. As in, there's nothing to them, really. The most interesting character of them all is probably Geki, but that's a stretch. Granted, this is before any story was really added to these games, so these characters don't really stand out. I mean, in future games, you got telekinetic boxers, an ancient Aztec creature, and of course, M. Bison. But not. But in this game, you've got Ninja, Old Dude, and other Old Dude. It really just isn't that good. Maybe my thoughts could change if you could play as these guys, but Geki, Retsu, Mike, Joe, and Lee have not been playable since this game. Heck, they weren't even playable in this game. There's nothing to say about Street Fighter 1. It's forgettable, it plays like trash, and it... Look, I'm not saying that I cannot see where this game is going, and I do respect the vision, but let me just put it like this. It's a miracle this game ever got a sequel, knowing Capcom. And it is a miracle that sequel even sprouted a new genre. But this is the worst Street Fighter game in my opinion. Number 10. Street Fighter 3 New Generation. Oh man. Well, I'll give credit where credit is due. The game looks and plays much better than the original. Though honestly, that's not saying a whole lot. I'm actually one to believe that Street Fighter 2 is a bit of an overrated game, but when Street Fighter 3 has less content than Street Fighter 2 did, and Street Fighter 3 has some mechanics that don't even work half the time, then you have to wonder, why would you play Street Fighter 3 when Street Fighter 2 is right there? Now, there are some things that I do like about Street Fighter 3. Like, for example, the selectable special moves. That's pretty cool. And the new characters that were introduced are also really cool. One of the best being Ibuki, a girl ninja. Now, granted, we've already got a ninja, but I kinda like Ibuki better. What is so bad about this game, though, is the fact that it just feels bland. It's a bland game. There's not a lot of pizzazz or flash to it, but there's also not a lot of substance to it. It's just bland. This game actually released with less content than the alpha games, which were coming out around the same time. And why fork your money for something that has less content? Now, this is exactly why I needed to stress that this was the only game to have the rule be broken. Because it does get better in the future versions. So much so that it doesn't even feel like the same game. But Street Fighter 3 New Generation is really bad. And I would have claimed it the worst, but at the very least it functions. You can actually play the game without having to break the controller. Our next game is going to be a little bit more of a controversial choice, but it's my personal opinion. Number 9. Street Fighter 5. This game is probably the most controversial game of all time, at least when it comes to Street Fighter. So no matter where I place it, it's going to be met with a little bit of backlash. The art style of this game is pretty good. I love the design for Ken, but there's one big problem. This game has the biggest clipping issue of all time. Like, seriously, look closely at some of the characters. Their body parts are clipping right through their clothes. It is very distracting. And with some of these characters, it's not even subtle. Like with Birdie, it's one of the first things you see. But hey, I guess. Look, this game is just very odd. But there are some other things that are really enjoyable about this game. For instance, the wide range of characters. I mean, you've got fan favorites like Dan Hibiki, Ken and Ryu, heck, even some returning characters like Gil and Urian. Meanwhile, you've got some brand new ones like Ed and Falk, who are all really good. Although, admittedly, Ed and Rashid get better in the sequel to this game, Street Fighter 6. But yeah, Street Fighter 5 definitely has a lot going for it, but a lot going against it. For instance, the story mode of this game, does it stink. It's probably the worst fighting game story of all time. And I'm not just saying that because 4D's Arcade said it first. I'm saying it because it makes absolutely no sense. But I think the worst part about Street Fighter V is this was the very first Street Fighter game to be money hungry. Now, granted, when the live service ended, yes, the money hungriness stopped, and all the content was free. But that doesn't mean it wasn't there. And some of that stuff wasn't even worth it on launch. And speaking of launch, when it released, this game was just plain bad. And it probably would have ranked just below New Generation. The only reason why I'm putting it higher is because it did improve, and it did get better. But, yeah. When it released, there was no single-player content. No single-player content in a Street Fighter game. Okay, I kinda get that, but there was also no arcade mode. Isn't that an auto-include for fighting games nowadays? Look, this game was just fraught with issues, and apparently went through several different changes, especially a build that was apparently being worked on for 2 years and then got scrapped. Street Fighter V, I just don't know what to say about this game. I don't hate it, but I don't really love it either. I love the gameplay, but its visual design needs a lot more work. I love the live service, but I also don't love it at the same time. The worst part about it, though, has got to be the lack of content on launch. But it did improve, and eventually we did get to the part where we can enjoy this game. But it took us a long time to get there. It should be noted that this was a little bit tricky. I was thinking about putting Generation above this, but New Generation never improved. And besides, I just like 5 better. But it should also be noted that from this point onward, this list is going to be a lot more difficult because every other game on this list is at the very least good. Now, the top ones are going to be easy, but everything in between, that's where things are going to get tricky. But I think I found the next one. Number 8. Street Fighter 2. We made it. This is the big one. Didn't think I would call number 8 the big one, but this is the big one. The game that defined an entire genre without even trying. Street Fighter 2 was the third best-selling arcade cabinet of all time. Below only Pac-Man and Space Invaders. That's a feat and a half right there. But what's even crazier is the fact that this game still kind of holds up. When it released, it had only 8 characters to play as. But you had more than one character to play as. That was insane back then. Remember, Street Fighter 1 only had 1 character. Technically 2, but that second character was just a reskin of the first one. But this game had everything. The special moves actually came out when you wanted them to. The characters were all memorable. The characters all played differently. The stages looked fantastic. And everything just clicked into place in this game. Now it would get better in future versions of the game. Super Turbo is probably the best one, however, in the American version it is glitched so that it's cranked up to the highest difficulty no matter what. Which is a bit frustrating, but yeah. But as for the characters, oh man, there's no shortage of what to say on them. Chun-Li, Guile, M. Bison, Akuma. Even if you don't know Street Fighter 2 that well, you know these characters. You know this game. Even if you don't play it. That's just how big of an impact Street Fighter 2 has. Now, is it the best Street Fighter game? No. Many games that released after this are much better. But Street Fighter 2 still holds its ground as a genre-defining title. It was this game that gave people the knowledge of how fighting games should be. It was this game that introduced the fighting game myths. It was this game right here. And we would probably not have any of those better games if it weren't for this one. So yeah. You know how I said that this list was going to be a very difficult one? Well, this is what I mean. Street Fighter 2 is the baseline. And Street Fighter 2 is considered one of the best games of all time. So this is going to be a really hard one. But I think there are a few games that beat it. Number 7. Street Fighter 3 Second Impact. Or Street Fighter 3 Second Impact Giant Attack. Wow, that name is so long. Anyway, Street Fighter 3 Second Impact is definitely a huge improvement over New Generation. There's not a lot I'm going to say about this one game, mainly because it's literally just Street Fighter 3 New Generation, except it actually works this time. But basically, all the bugs have been ironed out. The characters are even more memorable. And I forgot to mention this, but Gil is a character, and he has a very broken final boss. Not broken as in it doesn't work, I mean broken as in almost impossible. But almost. In fact, Gil has been listed as the hardest Street Fighter boss of all time. Aside from the Akuma fights, but nothing is as hard as them. But what Second Impact adds is first, mechanics that work much better, and second, new characters. Hugo is a great new addition with his very funny and yet very, very powerful attacks. And Urien, I made an entire video about Urien. You should already know my opinion on him. But they also added Akuma. And who could say no to more Akuma? So, Second Impact is great. I don't have a lot to say about this one, so let's just move on to the next one. Numbers 6, 5, and 4. Alphas 1, 2, and 3. Yeah, I'm clumping them all into one place. And that's because I have a very similar opinion on all three of them. They're basically just Street Fighter 2, but better. That's right, you heard me. These games are just Street Fighter 2, but much better. Why is that? Well, not only is the cast of characters a lot more interesting, like Furry and Armika, but the mechanics are also a lot more interesting. Now characters have more than one supers, EX attacks. The secrets were bumped up to 11, like with Evil Ryu and Akuma, Dan. Just Dan. And that secret fight where you can fight 2-on-1 with Bison. And biggest of all, just the art style. It just looks so good. I could explain it, but I've already been explaining it. Street Fighter 2, but better. Now, as for which one I think is the best, I'm leaning more towards 3 on gameplay, but 2 in terms of story. But 1 in terms of content, despite having the least amount of characters. Which is probably why I clumped them all together. Because they all excel at different things, whilst not really outshining each other. The Alpha series was definitely a series that I really liked. And I am so glad that people still care about this. But yeah. Our next few ones are going to be a little bit easier, but it's still a little tricky to decide between them. As in my opinion, they are the best Street Fighter games of all time. Number 3. Street Fighter 4. The Return of Street Fighter. This was the game that brought Street Fighter back into the collective consciousness. And I can't think of a better game to do so. Every single character from Street Fighter 2 returned, as well as some other characters. The returning characters are amazing and have movesets that just feel so cool. And some of the new characters are even pretty cool too, like Sea Viper and Jury. They are... The word I would describe this whole game is cool. But the mechanics are also great. You've got your combo meter, which acts like a normal meter in a fighting game, but then you've got your ultra meter, which fills up when you get hit. And that allows you to do a separate action, which is just plain amazing. It's a comeback mechanic that feels satisfying. And that's what you want in a fighting game. satisfaction. The art style of this game is also visually amazing. You can't mistake this game for anything else. It just looks that cool and that distinct. In fact, this game was so influential in the world of Street Fighter that the paintbrush technique actually became a part of Ryu's moveset in Smash Brothers. Oh, it's just so good. Now, I didn't rank it much higher because, compared to the other two games, it is a little simple for my liking. Also because some of the other new characters are not that amazing. Rufus. But other than that, yeah, Street Fighter IV deserves its title as the rebirth of Street Fighter. Number 2. Street Fighter 6. What is there to say about Street Fighter 6 other than it's great? Now, I know a lot of people have mixed opinions on Street Fighter 6. Personally, I love it. I think now that Capcom's got the whole weird live service action thing out of their system, they've done a much better job with Street Fighter 6. The drive mechanic is amazing. The new characters are all memorable, including Luke, who was technically introduced in Street Fighter V, but shush. And the old characters, well, I joke about most of those guys being just Street Fighter 2 characters, and I will continue to. They have good new twists to them, but my favorite part has gotta be the art style. It's just the right mixture of realistic but also cartoony. Like, yeah, it's obvious that this can't happen in real life, but it's realistic enough that you can suspend your disbelief. I also love the drive system's visual design, making it look like some spray graffiti. That's just charming. My favorite part, so yeah, that's my favorite part. One thing I'm not so fond of is the fact that parries are a little bit dumbed down in this game. Mainly because you now just have to hold down a button. But it's treated as a resource now. So, yeah. I'm not too mad about it. It was a tough choice between this one and the top one. But, at the end of the day, I chose the top one because I can't play this game very often. I don't own a PlayStation. Meanwhile, I can play the other one anytime I want. And that may make it biased, but that's why I'm giving number 1 to... Street Fighter 3 Third Strike is number 1, without question. Now, I'm not just saying that for internet clout, because I know this is a very popular game. But I'm saying it because, well, this is me and my dad's favorite Street Fighter game. Why? Well, personal reasons aside, this game just does everything right. The moves are complicated yet satisfying. The supers are super amazing. The strengths and weaknesses, the characters. Oh man, the characters. What do I... 12, Q, Gil, Urian. All of these characters are so amazing. And while they're not Street Fighter 2 levels of memorable, they are amazing. All I can say is there is a reason why Capcom feels the need to keep bringing this game up in conversation and why so many people want these characters to come back. I want these characters to come back. They are just so cool. Everything about 3 is just amazing. But one thing that I must say really raises 3 is the skill ceiling. The skill floor is just low enough so that people can enter and have fun with it. And I am terrible at this game and I love it. But the skill ceiling is so high that you can play it a million times and you will never get tired of it. Play it with friends, play it alone. Street Fighter 3 Third Strike is the best Street Fighter game of all time. And I find it very funny how this game is the best game when its very first iteration was the second worst. What a glow up. I mean, remember when I said that this game just doesn't feel like the same game? Well, this is why. I said the first generation was one of the worst. This is one of the best. So, I've been the Gamer Nerd. And until next time, say it with me, folks. 3, 2, 1. Sure you can!